Patents aren't just legal documents. They represent million-dollar decisions. The Patent Matters podcast takes you behind the curtain and shares best practices. Hosted by the experts at Ensemble IP, we're having real conversations with innovators, patent attorneys, agents, and IP leaders who know the stakes and know how to win.
Welcome to Patent Matters podcast. I'm Brad Buehler, the COO and founder of Ensemble IP, and I'm here with my colleague and co-founder, Jonathan Skovholt, today. And we're here to talk about patentability searching. Patentability searching is the process of looking for your idea and your invention and seeing if there's any information out there in the whole wide world that indicates that your idea may not be patentable. So Jonathan and I today will run through some of the concepts around patentability searching and how AI is really impacting the way we perform our patentability searches as a professional search firm and the way we think AI is going to help inventors, patent practitioners, search professionals do their own searching in the future. So hi, Jonathan. How are you doing today?
Good. How you doing, Brad?
I'm doing well. We do a lot of patentability searches, don't we?
We do quite a few. If you did by the number of searches we do, it's definitely the most we do. They tend to be on the shorter side, so they aren't necessarily the most by time, but it's at least first or second in terms of the types of projects that we do. So yeah, we do them quite a bit.
Yeah, we do. And we do them across all technologies, everything from simple mechanical, complex, electrical, computing, business methods, chemistry, pharma, everything. So it keeps us pretty busy.
Yeah. And it's interesting is like the whole field has evolved, been doing this for quite a while. Both of us have been doing this for quite a while. Even just the basic patentability search, was like the generic search, has changed. It has evolved through time, primarily in terms of much more focused, probably shorter searches, less exhaustive, but trying to get a good sense of whether that idea is out there or not. I've found that pretty interesting since we've started our careers, and it's further evolved since we started Ensemble as well.
Yeah,
what are your
exactly.
thoughts on that?
It's funny. I learned how to do patent searching into shoes at the USPTO, and I started my career at Foley in their library doing patent searching through dial-up on Telnet into dialogue. I've seen it change so much. What I've seen over the past almost 30 years is more technological focus or technical focus of the analysts performing the search. They are specialized in the technology as well as in the tools that they are using to do the search. But then more specifically, over the past 5 years or so, we've really seen AI tools become more helpful and useful for us in performing these searches. I think that's probably the most exciting development that I've seen since I got to leave the shoes in the search room at the patent office.
Yeah, I think not everybody might realize this. That was one of our premises for starting Ensemble was, looking to see whether these AI tools were useful and effective towards this because, our prior lives before that, at least I would encounter all sorts of AI tools before that. And my take on it was if they didn't perform better than Google Patents at the time, then what was the point of looking at the tool? And they really weren't. And then when we started Ensemble, that's the first thing we did. We went in and started looking at all these different tools and assessing them. And some were kind of meh, and some were pretty decent. And by decent, we're not saying like excellent. We're saying like actually helpful. It was interesting. It was quite a journey to even just determine whether these were useful. And then the next part is once we determined the answer was yes, then how to use them. And that's just been a continually evolving story since we got our start, which has morphed into creating our tool Quartet as well because of what we've learned through that process. So lots of evolution.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think, you started out as a patent examiner and then moved over to a private search firm. What has surprised you the most over the past 5 years with AI?
That's a good question. I would say to start with that it is useful. If you go to the time as an examiner, there was an automated search called a plus search. And I think their current search is still kind of based upon that to some extent, which just gave you a set of results. And, 1 in 10 cases, you could find something decent in that. It was at least a good start. But now, as we, was seeing that then through, our time at Landon and such too. But since then, we now have these tools that are able to give you what I would say is like a good first pass of results. And when I say first pass, I mean like this focused, jugular knockout search, see if anything's out there right away, which is what you would have used Google Patents for back in the day. That's the real use of it, was just quickly can I find something, one, that might make it into your report, and two, if it doesn't make it in my report, I can find the area of interest. That was a big thing. So I think my first big surprise was they were useful. I was honestly a little skeptical when we started that process. I've been told I have pretty high standards on these things. So that was the first thing. And then it was fun to see how they change. But the other really big surprise is this rise of generative AI, Gen AI, the GPT style things. They approach the problem from a different perspective. There's AI all over, from translations to data cleanup. And then there's AI for retrieval, which is, like some sort of like vectorization to find a set of results, maybe starting to understand areas of interest in those results. But then this whole different part, this GPT, LLMs, generative AI, it's a different way of approaching this. They do different things. It has its pros and cons, just like the other ones. And that has been a real big surprise to see how they're useful and also where their limitations are. I think a lot of it is we're in a period of evolution with them right now. I think we're still kind of shaking out what is what are they really like great for, and what are they like, what you need to still augment and do other techniques for. And that's been like the whole evolution of patent searching the whole time, as like, there's all these different techniques that we use, and you use different techniques for their pros, and then you use them to get around the cons of other ones. And that's just going to be another one of those techniques. Like AI is the fourth pillar of patent searching, and it's one of those as well. But this Gen AI, it's more on that analysis side. I think it's like where it's really helpful, but still it has that benefit, but also where are the limitations on it? And we're still, I feel like we have a pretty good sense on it, but I think industry at large and the general public at large is still feeling that space out. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, that's a good point. What I love about Gen AI is being able to get a quick summary or ask a quick question about a patent document without going through it line by line. It helps me get a quick lay of the land. But I think it also highlights some of the challenges. You have trust but verify. Is the information really there in the way you need it to be there? So it speeds me up, but I still validate the information. But I definitely find it saving me time in situations where maybe I wouldn't have gone as deep as I'm now able to go because I'm time crunched. So I found it helpful. Um, but I think it brings up some of the challenges, especially with Gen AI and retrieval. The two things that I have a challenge with, and I know that we've had a challenge with, is how do you build AI as a technique into your search because it's iterative? You're learning new information as you go through, and how do you build a search strategy? And then, secondly, how do you learn how to talk to the AI and put context into the system? So, as I think of those two, I I see that we've become more adept at using AI because we've understood now that it is not a magic button. It is something that a tool that we have to learn how to use effectively. And maybe I'll turn it to you. What are some of the things that we've done to learn how to use AI at the right times and the right steps in the process so that we can do an iterative search? And then how do we handle the context issue of making sure that we're giving the AI the right information at the right time?
That's a good question. One of the things that we did, and this was part of our assessment of just how is AI useful, was we were tracking because we have the search team to see the results that we provide out there. And that was a real aha moment in this process, testing and figuring out how to use it. As we've talked many times, the common way to test these systems is a comparative test. You have your search input and you have your results that come out from that. And we should come back to that a little bit after this as well. But that's a comparative test. Do I get results that make sense? But there are issues with that. We'll come and talk to those in this discussion. But then there's also what's the impact of this? Just because it performs well or not in a comparative test doesn't mean it's actually useful for you. We started measuring the usefulness of it. Were we finding results through AI? We could have found those same results through a keyword search, classification search, or citation search, but it might have taken longer. The question was, how are we uncovering these? By doing that, we realized the impact. We realized the impact was greater than we had expected, but at the same time, less than we expected. It was in this interesting sweet spot. At first, it was a shock that it was more helpful, and then it was a shock that it wasn't as helpful as we thought it was going to be. That's how we got to that fourth pillar of patent searching, the fourth way to do it. Taking that information, we started to realize how to use it because we knew where we were finding the results. We started to understand how to use it more effectively. And I think one of the big things that was helpful is within our team, we meet daily and share tips and tricks. You come up with really interesting techniques when you get desperate. When you get to a search and you can't find something, that's when you start trying anything possible out there. I say, you throw all sorts of things at the wall and see what sticks. And that's where you start to realize some of the things that maybe a system wasn't designed to do that it can do. A good example of that is taking multiple paragraphs that describe the same thing in different ways and using that as your input. That obviously, assuming that paragraph is really useful, is describing what you're looking for. That repetitive nature really helps a lot in terms of giving a focus to the system. It better understands the context, the how, the where, the why. Because you're repeating certain concepts, it understands those are weighted potentially more effectively. And granted, notice I'm personifying the system. It's not always, I kind of give it some sort of personality, but it's starting to, what it seems like, understand what I'm trying to get at. And it led to good results. And once again, I remember it wasn't me, it was another member of the team who did this. And it was like a shock. Oh, wow, look what you've been able to figure out and get good results. So I think that's a lot of it, measuring that impact and measuring how you find stuff. And then going further, building things in to use this more iteratively in a logical way. So retuning things with AI, taking traditional search strings, which are still relevant, and then using AI to give you a focus in it, using AI to tell the system what's a really good result in there to help, once again, also tune the results. All of these things came through a trial and error step that we were doing internally and realizing what was working and what wasn't working. And it's kind of like searching in general, where it's all these different tools that you use, all these different tricks, and knowing when to pull which trick out for which kind of project. There are tricks that are still very relevant that are outside of AI searching. They tend to come up in validity projects, the ones where you're really trying to get deeper into it. That's where you have those seasoned, experienced searchers that know how to do that. What do you see as some of the challenges in using AI effectively?
What I see is just learning how to interact with the tool appropriately. You're learning a new technique and being comfortable and knowing the limits and strengths. You brought up comparative testing versus impact testing. The way I like to think about this is I call it a two-brain problem. If you have two different patent analysts and give them each a disclosure, for instance, one might work inside your company and one might be an external resource. So they're each going to go and run that search, and they're probably going to come back with different sets of results. They should be in the same ballpark, but they're not going to be the same list of results, and they're not going to be in the same order. I don't think any of us would expect that to be the case. And the reason is that the internal resource has more context, understands your business, might know other pieces of information important to that project, whereas the external resource may not have that information. So there's additional context that people have. And we give the people the grace to have those differences. We don't always give the AI that benefit of the doubt. We expect the AI to be perfect immediately, and we go down the route of that comparative testing. And we need to learn how to use the tool more effectively to get the right information for us. And that's where I think the impact testing comes into play. And that impact testing is, what do you need to do to get great results? How does that impact your overall process? Are you getting higher quality results? Are you saving time? Is it a combination of both? And what is that benefit to you? I think that's really the challenge I see. And that also mimics the path we've taken in our own process with realizing the impact of AI and learning every day how to effectively use it. It's a tool that we get better at every time we use it.
So when do you think, because we've been talking a lot about using it in conjunction with other search techniques, which is really needed for like a comprehensive search. But when do you think like an AI like primarily focused search is enough to use to do a project or to answer a question?
Yeah. Let's talk about patentability searching because I think it is a fantastic tool for patentability searching. I always look at the type of question I'm asking and trying to answer and the risk associated with the quality of the answer. So, if, for instance, I'm working to help support a filing decision, we're looking for references most likely to be found by an examiner during a search to help make a decision on whether or not to file an application and spend that money to potentially just get a rejection from the patent office. I think AI is primed to help make that decision faster, quicker, and easier than ever before because it is a lower risk decision that you are making based off of that information. You always know when you get the no answer. You can't prove that something is actually patentable, but you can prove that it is likely not going to get past an examiner based on the references you find. So if the AI delivers those references and helps you make a decision in 15 minutes, as opposed to waiting 10 days to get a search back, that's going to speed you up and help you make decisions a lot more quickly. I think that's really where we're seeing AI go in terms of a fully automated patent search. Are there places where you're going to have to validate the information? Of course there are. But it's all about making us better, faster, quicker at what we're doing and more effective as patent professionals. What do you think about fully automated searching? Where should
So
we use it?
yeah, that's a really good question. The way I look at it is as a first pass kind of search, something where your question isn't a really can tolerate risk with the question. If you're looking for an exhaustive or comprehensive answer, I don't think it's quite there yet. But if you think of a fully automated search, like a patentability search, you put it in there and get 3 to 5 references out. And maybe they are the best 3 to 5 references. Maybe they're not quite the best 3 to 5 references. Let's say they're in the best 20. But you get that decision, you see that the idea is out there. Well, you now have saved a ton of time, a ton of effort in that. You've also potentially learned something from it as well if you go through and look at those results. So the end decision maker, that might be enough for them, especially if they're just trying to get a gist of an idea, see whether it makes sense to keep pursuing this avenue or not. As an attorney drafting an application, you can put those claims in and you quickly see, okay, is there something really clear that the examiner is probably going to find there or not? It gives you that quick assessment on, should I continue down this avenue or should I not? Even as a professional searcher, doing the same thing, I can then decide if I need to go to the next level down. Because if I can make that decision very quickly and say, like, okay, the idea seems to be out there, I probably don't need to do a lot of additional searching, no additional searching. Or maybe the idea seems like, okay, there doesn't seem to be strong references there. Well, now it's time to start an iterative approach. Maybe keywords are the key here. class codes are the key here, maybe taking some of these references and citation searching them. So I think of it as a great first pass at it, and that might be enough to answer your question. You might need to go deeper and deeper. And if you think about other types of projects like validity projects, the easy stuff's generally been found. By all means, you can do an automated search on it, quickly see if you find anything, and maybe that's good enough to say the patent's probably not valid and move on. Usually you need to dig deeper. So you can still include it in that process from the standpoint of an automated search. Many people think of it as a one and done. Even there, you can iterate because you change what you're searching for. You change how you're describing it. You change what you're focused on. So you could even do multiple automated searches and get a better sense on it, gives you a better sense on what you're jumping into, and then go deeper and deeper into it. So I think that's probably where this is going to move to. I mean, it already is a little bit, but I think that's where we're going to really see automated searching jumping in. And then it's that decision of, do I continue? Do I hold off and learn some more information, or is the idea dead? Those going to be the quick question. And then, you decide, do you want a professional searcher in? Do I want to do my own searching at this point in time? I think that's a lot of it as well.
One of the things that we always talk about in the professional search community is, is AI going to make us obsolete? And especially as we're talking about automated search techniques and automated search reports, I don't think it will. I really believe that there's a few components that are important from a professional perspective, and that's an understanding of the technology in which you are doing your search, as well as an understanding of the intellectual property laws around prior art. What does truly constitute prior art for your particular case? The automated search can get you further down the road a lot more quickly and help you make decisions sooner. But I see it more as a tool that makes us better, where we spend less time slogging through creating a data set and more time actually analyzing that data set. What do you think?
Yeah, I would agree on that. Once again, this first pass part, like doing that. Number two is the analysis. If you can start doing that analysis, okay, I can do the analysis. It gives me a quick idea on it. And then you get in the trust but verify. So you get into here, it says that here's a match to this feature. Here's a match to what it is. And then going in and actually looking at that reference myself at that point in time, the system is, presumably tuned somewhat on patent language to make it more easy to use as opposed to general language. But even then, it might not fully understand some of those concepts that well. And so I have to go in and look at it. I need to see if it's teaching away, those types of things as well. It could find a great reference, but it may not necessarily find the best citation areas. Let's say you have 10 features, it might find great citations for 8 of the 10. And then the last two, maybe I have to do some more digging. But even if the system is guiding me into those areas to look at, I'm spending less time doing my analysis. I'm taking what is potentially a 100-page document and I'm bringing it down to a page that I have to read and look at. And I can maybe quickly assess, like, this is a highly relevant reference, or this is kind of complicated. I need to dive in deeper. It's just not a good reference. Time to move on for it. And so that's where I really see it coming in. It's not just in the search retrieval side, it's also in this analysis side and helping me make a better decision more quickly. Because every day, how many new publications are there? It's almost exponential that it's happening. If you think of it, when I started at the patent office, published patent applications for the USPG Pub said, like, just come out. And it was clear that examiners were kind of drowning with those. And that was in the early stages of them. And now you have systems that are more global. Patent families helped to narrow down the number of results you had to look at. But the key is it just keeps growing and growing, the volume of things to look through. So every little area in the margins that you can do, that you can cut out noise, whether that is retrieval or analysis, helps me be able to do a deeper search in less time, or maybe actually in the same amount of time I currently have. I'm actually able to tread water as opposed to getting deeper and deeper under references and results to look through. And that's something I've been thinking about a lot through the years, but especially more recently, in that a lot of these techniques are speeding people up, but they're also allowing them to do the same quality work without having to be drowned in the number of results that they're looking at. I don't know what your thoughts are there.
Yeah, I agree. To take it back to patentability specifically, It is a very cost-effective tool to evaluate your innovations. For example, say your R&D department is submitting 20 invention disclosures to the IP department a month. If you're able to quickly assess those disclosures using an automated patentability search and cut 25 to 30% of them out, or even if you put the tool in the hands of your inventors and engineers so that they're able to make a call, you're going to save so much time and so much money that it's a no-brainer to be using a tool like this. And then you save the effort and time on the deeper searching for the ones that make it through that first pass. I see it as a productivity and an efficiency multiplier. But you and I know there's challenges. So what are some of the pitfalls that you've run into, and what worries you about blindly using an AI tool?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I've learned some of the pitfalls for myself, but I think one of the big ones is this absolute blind trust. It's less of an issue for myself and with my team because we use these day in and day out. So we kind of know the pros and the cons. But I do think there are lots of people out there who really think like, okay, this algorithm's going to tell me everything that I need to know. There's no reason to actually question what's there. I like to talk about how artificial intelligence is only kind of intelligent. It's useful, but it's not necessarily able to make the same decisions that we as humans can. We'll see at what point it can do that. If it's being predicted that it's going to happen, the question is at what point in time it will happen. Even then, I think you're still going to have a human in the loop for a lot of things. Some stuff you might be able to automate, some stuff you might not. So I think that's a big one. Blind trust in the algorithm, which often also turns into, well, AI should be able to do X, Y, and Z because it can do everything. And, the answer is it can't. It can do some things really well, and it can do some things mediocrely, and it can do some things not well at all. And, that's like learning this and using this. And we talk often with people about how best to use these tools and techniques, like the how, where, why. That's a very common one. People who know me know I say that all the time.
Yeah.
I think another issue that comes up is there is a black box to it, and there is some attempts at trying to clear up what's going on in that black box. But the key is you don't really know what's going on in there. And I, as a user, I'm not as concerned with that, but I can see where that can become an issue for some individuals. Lots of people would love to know a lot more of like what's going on, what are the gears and mechanisms in that box that are getting those results to you. But I, knowing enough about this and doing like multidimensional vectors and multidimensional vector spaces, that's really confusing. I don't even think humans can actually conceptually understand what's going on in some of these systems. I don't know if you necessarily need to. And if you think of it, it's its own search technique. We talk about the 4 pillars of patent searching. Keyword searching, that's a technique. You pull out keywords and look for things that describe that. It has pros, it has cons. Not everything uses that same terminology. Some things have really generic terminology. Class codes, another technique. In some cases, classification codes are really descriptive and really helpful for you to find areas. In other areas, they're super not descriptive and kind of the point where class codes aren't really that useful. You also have the issue of things being reclassified. You have the issue of different authorities using different classification systems. So what you're hearing me is talking about is pros and cons of those techniques. Bibliographic searching, citation searching. Well, that's relying on an examiner or an applicant to tie references together. They're not doing an exhaustive search. So it's a good shortcut. I think of a citation search as like a Google patent search back in the day. It gets you something. It's a really easy way to find similar stuff, but it doesn't necessarily answer all your questions. If it gets you to something helpful, that's great. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Same thing with assignees and inventors too. You're relying on a prolific inventor or an assignee that's well documented on these things. But if you have a startup company, their names aren't well known, that's not very helpful. All those techniques have pros and cons, and they're useful in certain ways. And these AI techniques are the same. They're going to have their pros and cons. You know when to use them, you know when not to use them. The other part is knowing how to use them together. That's always been the key. keywords and class codes, doing that and making sure you don't double filter. That's the technique that's really effective there as well. You could do the same thing, like a good class code, and then adding the AI in to give you focus. I talk often about with citations. You can do a citation search of a patent and a citation search of the citations. Great at finding a lot of stuff that's potentially relevant, but a lot of noise, using the AI in there to help focus that down. Neither one of those are exhaustive searches. They're all just different snippets and ways to look at it. So what do you think are some of the
Yeah.
pitfalls and things that worry you? I kind of went off on a tangent in there. So let's bring it back to what we were talking about. What do you think are some of the pitfalls and things that worry you about AI searching in
Yeah.
general and some of these techniques?
You talked about blind trust in the algorithm, and I think one of the pitfalls we should consider is the converse, which is blind distrust. I do think that we run into that as well, which is if you are not using it, you run the risk of missing information. We know that empirically from tracking where references come from. I do want to call that out that blind trust and blind distrust are flip sides of the same coin with regard to using AI tools. I want to go to something you touched on, which is the risk level associated with the decision you're making. That is one of the pitfalls as well that comes in with blind trust. You need to know what your risk tolerance is for the decision you're making and making sure that you are doing an appropriate search or you have the actual skill to perform the search. AI may still be the right tool for the job, but if you're not skilled in how to use it or know the different techniques to get the best out of the AI, you could put yourself at risk. I think that is one of the pitfalls we all need to be aware of, making sure we know and understand where the gaps are and what the steps are for an increasingly comprehensive search. So again, patentability, I think that AI is a great tool for a patentability search and should always be your first step because it can help you make a decision quickly. But if you're going down in validity or freedom to operate, you want to be putting in those extra techniques, those extra steps, because the risks associated with that, not just in terms of potential infringement, but just money for R&D development, the risks are higher. So I would make sure you're layering on other search techniques for a more comprehensive search. One of the other things that we've seen is ensuring the LLMs that we're using are tuned to patent and technical language. One of the challenges with patent information is we can be our own lexicographers. We can give definitions to words that are contrary to what they mean in other everyday life. One of the big challenges, even using LLMs that are tuned to patent language, is making sure that we're reviewing the references and understanding how the language is being used. That's another pitfall that falls into understanding how to use the tools effectively and structure your search. What are your thoughts and what have you seen from using LLMs compared across different technology areas or just patents to general?
Yeah, that's good. So the LLMs, as I said, many of them are tuned to general language and some get tuned to pattern language. The one that we developed is tuned to pattern language. And they tend to work better in some tech areas than in others. If you can describe once again how, where, why, they're good at that. They're good at finding those types of things. But if you say are looking for something that's really specific, like some chemistry, like you have a chemical formula, you have maybe a structure or something in there, they don't have general knowledge. And they kind of break down at that point in time. So once again, you go back to the how, where, why. This is learning how to use them effectively. They tend to work better in some technology areas in terms of asking questions. You just think about how to better ask your questions or what types of things can you get out of it and tamper those expectations to what it is capable of doing effectively. And that's an interesting part with these LLMs is they give you an answer. Like they're going to give you an answer for the most part. Some of them will, especially if you're outside the bounds of what it's allowed to give an answer in, then that's nice when they say like, okay, I can't talk about that. I'm not really trained on that part of it. But if you're kind of in a gray area, it will give you an answer. And that's where you get back to that trust but verify part of it to make sure on it. One of the things I'm really looking forward to, especially like our system, and I think you'll see them in other systems, it's bringing back and explaining that answer. So I can go in and I can then agree or disagree with that answer, or in essence, learn more about it. One of the ones I found, kind of interesting and funny was I remember asking one of these LLMs a question of like, does it describe the following concept? The system said, no, it doesn't describe that concept. Instead, it describes this other concept. And that other concept is exactly what I was looking for. It just didn't quite understand it. So just because it didn't quite understand that those were the same thing, I still got to the answer I needed. That's a key part. It's not necessarily always making that decision for me. I'm still in that decision loop. And that's the way I look at it. I look at it as a way to focus me. I look at it as a way to tell me what is the language I'm looking for, what are the concepts I'm looking for. Even when these systems tend to go a little bit off, they're usually fairly correct. They might use different language, and it may not realize that language is the same as what you're looking for, but it still points you back at it. And then you're like, okay, got it. I understand as the human, my answer's been answered. It's just, I have to change how it looks at that. And that's something that, once again, I'm really looking forward to, is having it do this, explaining that answer to us. And I know that's coming very shortly. So anybody watching this, that might be a little different, but that's something I'm very much excited for. And I'm curious what you're excited for coming up in the future as well. Where do you see this going next? What are you really looking forward to?
I'm really excited about the change to the overall search process. So being able to input a invention idea and have a system walk you through creating the search yourself. So you are not worried about how you build your queries and what you're looking for. Having the system break it down for you and walk you through a patentability search. So it's not as black boxish. I am more in control and I can tweak it along the way to make sure it is still understanding what I want it to be looking for. But it's speeding me up and it's making it faster. And if I'm not a professional patent searcher, I'm able to do this myself. I'm able to jump in, put my idea in, and I'm able to get some results right away with less than 10 minutes of effort and get a view of my idea. And that, I think, is the most exciting thing for me than where I see this going, is making patent information easily accessible to non-patent search professionals.
I was going to say something I'm looking forward to is this aiding in the analysis. For anyone who's not a professional, that's a pretty intensive step. These documents can be 100 pages. I've seen them at 1,000 pages. Most of them don't tend to be 1,000, but they have a lot in them. So anything as a professional user that can help guide me in to better understand that. And prior to these generative AI LLMs helping, and also like the trust, the adding in an answer to it. Your only ways to do it were to look at the title, look at the abstract, look at the drawings, and try to use keyword highlighting to help you with it. And keyword highlighting is really beneficial, but totally dependent on the words you use. If you pick bad words or poorly chosen words for your project, then it's not going to give you great results in the end. It's going to give you like areas of interest that are irrelevant to you. But then the other issue is the colorful bit of language. And I do searching in English, and English words have multiple meanings. And just because I have a high concentration of something doesn't mean it's relevant. And just because I have a low concentration of something doesn't mean it's irrelevant. And I'm looking forward to this as another technique to help guide me and help focus me, because if I was to use just my keyword highlighting, I might miss really relevant sections. And this can help point me back to this is highly relevant. It might even quickly pick out and say, everything you're looking for is right here. And Maybe I missed some keywords and that helps me identify that really quickly. So I'm thinking as a professional, doing a deeper search, but also as a non-professional, as you pointed out, it is going to be easier for them to start making these decisions. Another thing I am looking forward to is the fact that you can start to get some of these decisions in like the R&D individuals, thinking back to my time in grad school, those people working in a
Yeah,
lab who don't necessarily know what a patent is, but at least they can start to point them more quickly at, okay, this might exist, it might not. They might not realize that this reference is relevant from a patent perspective, but they might not be looking at it from that perspective. They might be trying to discover technology. You never know what it is. But if you make it easier for them to discover that, it helps them strengthen what they're working on. It helps them focus what they're working on. And then ultimately, the organization they're working for, hopefully, is filing for IP protection, helps them strengthen their portfolio as well. So all of this is quite beneficial. And then the last thing within that, in terms of this searching, is as we know, bringing references up in an IDS is becoming more and more of an issue. It's becoming more important in dealings with the PTAB and litigation. It is probably pretty important to start adding these references in for those organizations that aren't doing that, at least trying a first pass of a search. And this is an easy way to do it.
exactly. Yeah, I think those are all great points. I think to bring us back to the main topic, which is AI and patentability search. If you've been listening to us, we're big proponents of using AI as a tool. And I believe our philosophy is that it is an important tool for us to be using. We need to know how to use it. And you're not just going to go onto a work site and start swinging a hammer around in a drill. You're going to know how to use the tools. So making sure that you know how to use the tools that you're using effectively, that's going to be very important. And I guess, are there any thoughts you have about how you effectively learn how to use an AI search tool?
So, how to effectively use an AI search tool and tips on it. The first one is curiosity, thinking outside the box, which is, colloquialism used all the time, but it's important in this. These are new techniques, even search retrieval, which has been around for several years at this point in time. But even that, it's not necessarily fully understood what's the best way to do it. And these algorithms change, they get updated. And so the key is to be curious and to try different things. I often will tell people just give it a try. If you get zero results or it doesn't give you anything that's useful, you can usually tell that pretty quickly and then move on and try again. Instead of this mindset of like, this is the one way to do it. By trying and iterating, I'm a big proponent of iteration. You start to feel out what works and what doesn't. An important part in that, though, is when you do this iteration, measuring the impact, not
Mhm.
doing it subjectively and being like, well, it seems to give me good results. So, thus, it does. These are great results. It's giving results. You need to look to see whether they are beneficial to your project or not. I do highly recommend tracking and measuring where you're finding stuff so you are understanding how to better use it. Thinking about what your search input is. I've done a lot of testing and playing around in that. Some of the tricks that I recommend are like 2 to 3 paragraphs description. Didn't just come out of thin air. That's from testing and trying, really feeling it out. The other part of writing things multiple ways is really helpful as well. What we're looking for is the linking of words that creates these vectors, and describing the same thing in multiple ways creates multiple vectors that describe the same thing. And that helps strengthen that that's what you're looking for, or those are the alternative ways to say it, because these systems are kind of independent of synonyms, but the words that are chosen are important. Once again, this all comes from testing and experimenting. And I think that's the biggest part on this is to experiment. If you think it's a crazy idea, give it a try, see what you get out of it. Don't trust that as the only way to do it. Try that technique again, try it again. If it works, then it's a good technique. If it's not working, then it's probably not a good technique. But a lot of these things don't take that much time to do. So just playing with that and feeling that out and learning from your mistakes, learning from what works well, learning from what doesn't. I'm a big proponent of you learn from your mistakes, you don't learn from your successes. So trying those out and seeing where some of your mistakes are or seeing what's working so you better understand how to use it. What are some of your last thoughts?
I like your point about curiosity. A key point is trying it out, seeing what it does for you, what impact does it have on you and your process, and not discounting it because it doesn't work the first time. That's my biggest takeaway. If it fails the first time and saying, oh, these things are never going to work, they're working. I can promise you they're working. It is just simply figuring out how to effectively use it. And because it's something new, it's something different than putting in, find me this word within 2 words of this other word. The rules aren't as clear and defined. So you just have to figure out how to experiment and try it. A natural curiosity to see how it impacts your work and an openness to trying different things are the two biggest takeaways that I would like to leave our listeners with as they're figuring out how to use AI in their process.
Yeah, I would add one thing into that. Not just that you are trying it out and it's giving you results. Look at those results. They may not be what
Yeah.
you expected, but they still might be answering your question. And I think that's a big thing is some people coming into this have it a preordained, preconceived notion of what this needs to be doing. And that's the answer. And if it doesn't do what I expect it to do, then it's not working. Well, no, that's not necessarily the case. The question is, what can it do? What is it bringing? What's the value it's bringing to you? How do I use that effectively? And that then goes in and changes your search process. You have to come in with an open mind to experiment and an open mind in terms of what are you going to get out at the end of this. I think that's a really important thing. We hear a lot of stuff about AI, every part of our daily lives. I think you read anything about the news, you're going on social media, it's coming up all over the place. And so there's somewhat of an understanding of what AI should be doing, but that doesn't mean that's what it can do. And it may be doing something better than what you realize. It might be doing something different than what you realize. But opening your eyes and being open to that, I think, is very important.
Great conversation today, Jonathan. It's been fun talking through this. Thanks to our listeners for joining us. Hope you found some interesting tidbits in here and learned more about our views on AI, where we think AI is going, and specifically how it can help you make better decisions using patent information.